brief round of introductions. Let's do a brief round of introductions, and I'll just go as the order that I see on my screen. Steve Langford. You do need to unmute. We're not hearing you, Steve.
There we are. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Good morning, everyone. Senator Bonamici, thank you so much for having me. Steve Langford, Beaverton School District. I'm the Chief Information Officer.
Thanks for being here. Commissioner Thompson.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Leanne Thompson, Clatsop County Commissioner, District 5, the southern half of Clatsop County, out in rural, remote Oregon. Thank you.
Thanks for being here. And then we have Superintendent Hurwitz.
Hi, thank you for inviting me. I'm the superintendent of Clatsop School District, a small rural school district in the northwest corner.
Thanks for being here. Mayor Callaway.
Good morning, and thank you all for joining us. I'm Steve Callaway, the mayor of the city of Hillsborough.
Thank you. Kathy Tate.
Hello, thank you for having me. I'm the CEO of Online Northwest. We're a rural and small city internet service provider in Yamhill County, located in McMinnville.
Terrific. Yep. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Skip Newberry, President and CEO of the Technology Association of Oregon.
Terrific. Ariane.
Good morning. Thank you. Ariane Colombo with Columbia Pacific Economic Development District. We cover Columbia, Clatsop, Tillamook, and Western Washington County.
Terrific. Mayor Rogers.
Hi, good morning, Representative Rick Rogers, Mayor, City of Newburgh.
Thank you so much for joining us. Erica, from the school board.
Hi, everyone. I'm Erica Lopez. I'm from the Hillsborough School Board.
Terrific. Superintendent Goldman.
Good morning. Thanks for arranging this. I'm Dan Goldman. I'm the superintendent of the Northwest Regional ESD, and we serve the school districts in 4 counties in Washington County, Tillamook County, Clatsop County, and Columbia County. Thank you.
Thank you. And Stuart Long, also from the ESD.
Yes, I'm Stuart Long. Good to be here. I'm the Chief Information Officer with Northwest Regional ESD.
Terrific. Thanks. And we do have some media with us. And also I mentioned my staff. I couldn't do what I do without my staff. Allie and Jack are with us today. So again, thank you so much for joining us. We know because we're on this call today, broadband is essential infrastructure, and access to the internet truly has revolutionized the way we work, the way we live, the way we communicate. And I've met with several communities even before the pandemic to discuss the challenges they face when they don't have internet access. And the pandemic, of course, has only increased our reliance on access, and the lack of broadband has exposed widening gaps. I note that there aren't just gaps in connectivity, there's also access to devices that's creating inequities in the system as well. We know rural and low-income communities are disproportionately affected. According to the Census Bureau, 45% of rural America does not have access to high-speed internet. And we know businesses must be competitive, and limited access to the internet hinders their potential. I remember visiting Sealy Mint up in Clatsop. Mike Sealy was saying, see the railroad track down the road? If we cross the railroad track, we can get access to the internet. So it's also an issue not only with businesses and small businesses, but also an issue with telemedicine, which has been allowing individuals to see healthcare providers who aren't readily available in their communities, and especially during the pandemic. And Providence Health, for example, has spoken about the telehealth needs of patients in rural areas. That doesn't work if there isn't a good connection. So as a leader on the Education and Labor Committee in Congress, I've been very concerned about equity in education. Remote learning for students was severely hampered for those who couldn't get online. I'm grateful for all the creative efforts that school districts have taken to try to close that gap. And I'm glad that funds in the American Rescue Plan helped, including sizable grants to districts in Northwest Oregon, but we know there's still work to do. Even now, with many students, many if not most students back in schools, reliable internet access is important, but still challenging for too many. So there's an exciting opportunity to make progress. Of course, the bipartisan infrastructure bill, which is now law, includes $65 billion for broadband, at least $100 million of which will come to Oregon or is coming to Oregon. But to close the digital divide and to address those equity issues, we really also need the Build Back Better Act. The Build Back Better Act, which is passed the House and is pending in the Senate, will continue to increase this access to connectivity, to devices, and it's going to continue to sort of build on the momentum of earlier broadband investments like those in the CARES Act from last year, American Rescue Plan, and others. So I look forward to hearing about how those funds are working, the existing funds, and the potential with the funds that could be unleashed with the passage of the Build Back Better Act in the Senate. I also want to mention a very helpful resource from the National Telecommunications and Information Administration. They've compiled all the federal funding opportunities for broadband, devices, and more all into one handy place. So please share this widely with your networks, and the staff is going to put that link in the chat if you don't already have it. And then of course, my office is happy to assist you with navigating these opportunities. So we're really grateful for your dedication to expanding broadband access and really looking forward to our conversation ahead. And so I'm going to start with a bit of a question and then just open it up for conversation. And I don't have a formal speaking order or anything. So I'm going to start with the education leaders on the call today and ask you, well, before I do that, I know Skip is only going to be able to be with us for part. So why don't I open it up with Skip for comments, and then I'll turn to the education leaders and ask you what are some of the examples about your work. But I'll let Skip go ahead because I know he can't stay for the whole event.
No, I appreciate it, Congresswoman. In terms of just underscoring the importance around sort of broadband and connectivity, what's been interesting is over the last 18 months, just the number of conversations with elected officials at the state level. Now that's the number one topic that comes up is, how do we sort of shore up our infrastructure in a way where access to critical healthcare services, education services, as well as governmental services are now increasingly delivered digitally. And broadband infrastructure is obviously critical to that. And so as we think about some of the federal funding that is being unlocked through the efforts of folks like yourself in Congress, how can we as a state better position some of the folks who are most in need, obviously being education service districts being top of the list. And then also thinking about some of the different providers, ISPs and others that have been doing some interesting work in this space. In what ways can they access some of the funds to scale up further some of the work that they're doing? And so the need is great, but so is the opportunity here. And we're excited to look for ways to identify and highlight projects and players, stakeholders here who could benefit from some of the increased federal funding.
That's really helpful. That's helpful, Skip, and thanks for your leadership. And I know there are a lot of efforts at the state level as well, and it's going to be collaborating with them once we start seeing how the infrastructure funding and then the Build Back Better funding are coming in, those all important funds. So thanks so much. So now I'm going to start with the education leader. So what are some of the examples of the work that you've done to connect students and get them online? How is it making a difference educationally? And let's start with Superintendent Goldman of Northwest Regional ESD.
Yeah, well, thanks so much again for getting this group together. I'm really interested actually in hearing what people are doing. One thing that's true is even though we're connected, we get to connect. You don't get in the same room with people all the time who are working on similar issues. So this is great. We at Northwest Regional ESD, we are actually in a very large educational collaborative called the Cascade Technology Alliance, which is a collective between us and Multnomah ESD. And we serve, I'm looking at Stuart here on the call, but we serve, I think, over about 50% of the population in technology services across the state out of our shop. Internet connectivity obviously has been a huge issue during the pandemic. We've always seen it as an issue of equity and inequity in our systems, especially in our rural settings and the intersection of poverty with not being connected to the internet, very, very high. So we're highly engaged right now in mapping this problem, which sounds kind of really passive. But what we're finding is we really don't have adequate maps and data to actually tackle this issue, like exactly which houses don't have connectivity and what we can do to solve that problem. We're in much better shape now because we've been, and when I say we, Stuart and his team has been running after that for a number of months now. So we're getting better data. A few things that we've done that will not sound revolutionary, but they really were for kids and for families over the pandemic, is a massive effort to get hotspots out to folks, things that we could not have done without the relief funds that you fought so hard for, Congresswoman, so thank you. Hardware, hotspots, those types of services. Our schools, we have a number of our rural schools like in Mist and out in the mountain ranges here that are really disconnected, and Stuart and his team worked with Starlink and tried to, and actually have now gotten high-speed internet via satellite in a number of communities. So those are just a couple of things that we've been running after, and I would welcome, if you're okay with it, Congressman, if Stuart can correct everything I just said and give you some better information.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And maybe the two of you can, I have a couple of follow-ups, and you talked about the hotspots. It's my understanding that even getting hotspots to some students isn't adequate because they still can't connect in those very rural areas. And then if you could address the mapping issue as well, what's the process that you're using to accurately identify where the need?
Dan, if you don't mind, and Congresswoman, if I may take that. So I think one of the challenges we did run up against was exactly what you noted, which was we would send a technician out to a house to meet with a parent with a hotspot from Verizon, with a hotspot from T-Mobile, and a hotspot from AT&T. And they would literally sit there until they could figure out with that family member which one was going to work at that house. Now, that's an extreme example and didn't happen in all cases, but the challenge was which one, based on that location of that house, whether it was in a dell or at the top of a mountain, was going to be the one that worked. And those were usually in our more rural settings. In the suburban and urban settings, we were actually pretty good with what we were able to work with the state and ODE in partnership, and Steve at Beaverton in working on a statewide contract for Verizon. So I really need to also thank the Oregon Department of Education, who's not here, but they were a huge player in that. So, but furthermore, on the mapping front, what we've really tried to do is, as Skip noted, the providers have a huge challenge here, which is they have maps that show where they are, but we also we don't know where they're not. And so our approach to this has been, rather than try to work out the location of every house where every cable comes in, let's take it in the reverse direction, which is let's work out where the folks in poverty are, because we know where those pockets are. And then we can come at this from a different angle, which is that kind of intersection of availability and poverty. And just say, okay, where we have programs like the Affordable Connectivity Fund and ACT program, which is formerly the Emergency Broadband Benefit Bill. How can we get families that are in poverty, that do have availability, maybe access to funds that allows them to access the internet in a way they cannot today? Because we know there was an education superhighway study that just came out, and something like 181,000 Oregonians are without access to broadband simply because they're experiencing poverty. And so let's get after that problem, because we can solve that right now, while we help and work with the providers to help build out their capacity, because that is going to take time. That's a shovels project in working in the ground. So that's how we're approaching it right now.
That's really helpful. Thank you. And I really appreciate that, the aspect of, if you can't identify every house, start where the pockets of poverty are. I wonder if we could hear from the other education leaders. I know Erica Lopez from the school board, and of course, Steve from Beaverton, and Superintendent Hurwitz. Can we hear about your efforts as well?
Hi, everybody. So I am very happy to have Mayor Steve Calloway on here with me, because as many of you know, Hillsborough School District and the city of Hillsborough have partnered on creating something that is our own to service our area, which I couldn't have come at a better time that this was already in plan. But definitely saw a lot of benefits to having this partnerships beyond even education. As many of our families that you all know that we service in our district, it was actually having access to internet. And you mentioned, Congresswoman, the telehealth visits. Well, we were able to give one-to-one lab notebooks to students. And a lot of our students also help parents get unemployment benefits or schedule appointments or all the things that they wouldn't have been able to do with that equipment that they had. So it did more than just help them with schoolwork, but it also helped the entire family, which was a huge opportunity for us to support our families. But the other aspect that we also did at Hillsborough was having bilingual help desk. So a lot of our families also don't have digital literacy. So learning how to use the internet, how to connect. And if you have littles, they're not going to be able to help you when the Wi-Fi is down. So really our parents were the ones that were our help desk technicians at home. And so a lot of that support that we did was pivoting from our normal operation hours and really having evening times and bilingual technicians available to help our families troubleshoot. And that was really helpful. And we're continuing to do that. But I think one of the things that we can think about in the future is how are we also having education around digital literacy be part of this solution and partnering with our local municipalities. The libraries are a great place for families to go and learn. So just thinking about that, and of course, just the infrastructure in the future, I think that that's something that is very important for us, right? Hillsborough actually services not just within city limits, but we also have some rural schools and we have those challenges. And so for us is thinking this is I almost think a great pilot with Hillsborough, and then seeing where else can we have this partnership and kind of grow that so that all of our families in our district are supported. But that's just a little bit about what we're doing in Hillsborough.
That's really great. And thank you to you and of course, Mayor Callaway for your leadership. Mayor, did you want to add something to that? And I know you have an education background as well. So I still think of you as an educator as well as a mayor.
Thank you. So, for us, it's an issue of equity. Back in about 2014, Google was looking at providing, high-speed fiber throughout the metro area. And, they looked at Hillsborough, but they were only going to do it in areas where there was a critical mass. And that was going to create a have and a have not kind of division in our city. And we have worked so incredibly hard to make sure that services, amenities, everything is equitable throughout our city. And, as the most diverse large city in the state, it's even more paramount for us. And so then, we launched into looking at and did a study. And in 2015, the consultant said, wait. So we did. And a few years later, we began to look at doing it again. And that's when we started it. And we have one of the lowest connected census tracts in the metro area. One is in South Central Hillsborough, and the other one is in Rockwood. And so that's where we put Highlight, which is our municipal fiber network. That was where we targeted first, because we wanted to make sure that those areas that had the least connectivity now had equal, if not better, access. Now, Erica does a great job as our school board member and was chair when we started working on a lot of this. And the school district passed a $400 million bond for technology, safety and security improvements, and a host of other things. So they came to Hillsborough, the city, and said, would you bring it out to all of our schools and be our ISP? And we will give you, and I think it might have been $13 million. And so we were able then to kind of change how the phasing, if you will, the rolling out. So now we are the ISP for Hillsborough School District, and that saves them $500,000 a year over their previous provider. So that's money then that stays back in the schools and helps serves kids. Plus, that meant now we are able to we took our fiber network, out to Cornelius where we have schools, up to North Plains where we have schools, and out in parts of unincorporated Washington County. So, our footprint has really expanded to meet the students, that are far and outside our city limits. So it has just been a great partnership for us. And during and then, I think, in the pandemic, I would say that we didn't, the pandemic didn't create inequities, but it sure revealed them, and it exacerbated those that already existed. And so we were so fortunate to already have some of this in place when the pandemic struck, because it meant then that kids still could have, and families and entrepreneurs could still have access, to high speed, high quality internet, even during the pandemic, and especially as kids and everybody was working from home. So, that's a 30,000 foot view, and I hope I did it in gig speed, so I didn't take up more time than I should have.
No, we really appreciate your leadership there. Thank you so much, Mayor Callaway. Let's hear from our other education, our superintendent from Clatsop, Superintendent Hurwitz.
Yes, hi. Thank you for having me on. We really struggled with the connectivity issues. We were able to distribute one-to-one devices to all of our students, and we did work with the ESD and with Verizon distributing some hotspots, but the problem seems to be our land, the location. It's very hilly and valleys, and there's lots of what I call dead spots. So we had to get really creative, and we had to put hotspots in locations that students had to drive to. So, and that created its own set of problems, because then we were asking families to drive to a location to either sit in their car or to go in. We trying to reach our more rural areas. We would find a place where we had good connectivity. We also partnered with a local co-op who did as best as they could getting broadband out to our more rural families that the larger corporations were not interested in pursuing. So, and then we worked with them, and the city gave us a grant to support some of that work that we were doing there. So the city of Clatsop was really instrumental in that early on. Our school district is small, and the first round of funding, we were just really struggling to get all of the pieces, all of the equipment out. But then when it came to, oh my goodness, how do we connect everybody? And then, as our more rural families in poverty, we had to support them through paying for the service for them. And so, but you do what you have to do.
Sorry, I appreciate your efforts up there. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to the potential from the funding that will come from Build Back Better. So we're waiting with anticipation for the Senate to get going on that. And let's hear from Steve from the Beaverton School District as well.
Yeah, much has been shared by my colleagues. I think we're in Beaverton, we were very fortunate that we had a bond that was passed in 2014 that provided the devices for most students, but not all. And so for us, when we moved into remote learning, it became about how do we address connectivity. That became the number one problem. And we're really grateful that we've got a highly collaborative group in Oregon in terms of education leaders, and very grateful for Superintendent Goldman and Stewart from Northwest Regionally at ESD to be partners in solving the problem, so that we're not all trying to do it ourselves. For us, it was very similar, as we tried to address equity issues, it became about how do we get hotspots out. But we soon learned that it was a really multifaceted problem, because as people have mentioned, there's places in the city where a hotspot works or doesn't. We also were fortunate to engage with Comcast Internet Essentials, and that was able to be used as well. So for us, we found that really to address this, it required us to think in terms of a multifaceted solution. For us, we were very fortunate that we were one of 13 districts selected by the Consortium of School Networking, COSN, to participate in a student home internet connectivity study. So in January of 2021, we worked with partners to analyze all Zoom meetings for all students for 3 weeks in January, and all factors that contribute into the student experience. Because what we found was there was differences in hotspots as well, not just geographic locations, but there were many things that were contributing to students maybe who had access, but it was not adequate access for learning. And so that was, for us, the hotspots were the beginning of the solution, but it requires a lot deeper thinking to think about what contributes to digital inclusion. So students being able to fully participate in learning. And so we're, again, that's kind of the work that we've been doing. And we're very grateful that we're doing this work together with other school systems.
And Steve, were you able to do that district wide to identify where the issues were? Because, you know, and the concern that I have about the adequacy of mapping and identifying where the needs are, maybe your survey could be instructive in that.
Yeah, we're, like I said, we're very fortunate to be one of 13 districts. This study was shared with the FCC in terms of helping support emergency connectivity funding. We were able to map to the household kind of the student experience. And it was a combination of the data that just exists by us having a Zoom session, and also data from regional speed tests and providers. And so we were able to work with a partner. They did the heavy lift here with that data set to examine all the variables that go into a quality experience like we're having now on Zoom versus one that would be less adequate. And so there's some technical considerations. There's also considerations about what else is a family doing as the students trying to learn on the hotspot. So for us, we were, that was helpful in understanding, but Stuart brought up a really good point. We kind of know we need to start from where there are areas of poverty and where there's areas of insufficient access, and we need to focus there first.
Appreciate that. Thank you so much. Let's hear from our elected leaders, Commissioner Thompson and Mayor Rogers. We haven't heard from yet. And then I really want to get to Ariane and Kathy as well with their perspective.
Thank you, Congresswoman. This is intensely interesting and valuable. What I see is we have an unregulated utility that is essential for everyday life. So it's probably too late, the horse is out of the barn, but to the extent that you can get adequate and relevant data, we've got a chance to deal with this problem, because no data, no problem. I love that people are going from the system issues to the individual, because that's what it will take, is that broad a spectrum. And the fact that the internet companies can use one home in a census tract to indicate the level of service is completely unacceptable. What we've heard this morning is, here's the effective antidote for that. The middle mile, the first mile, the last mile, all of it, you're bringing in the federal funds gives us the opportunity. Absent data, we can't really do what needs to be done. The school districts are essential. We look forward to working with them. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I know you've cared about this issue for a long time. Mayor Rogers, how are things in Newburgh?
Oh, things are good in Newburgh. We're mentioning school districts, but I'll not get off on that tangent anyway. But otherwise, what I know about broadband is limited. So this is an educational call for me. So I appreciate that. And actually, what I know regarding the school district is largely anecdotal. I know when we started into this whole problem with the COVID issue, we did deploy, I think they deployed buses with hotspots throughout, and a lot of the targeted areas were the less affluent areas of town. But beyond that, I'm just happy to learn and hope that additional funding will come our way. So thank you.
Well, thanks for joining us. And I remember at one point, pretty early on in the pandemic, talking to someone from a school district who said it's easier to find a ventilator, and this was when ventilators were hard to find, than to find a hotspot. Because once the demand was increased so significantly in a rapid period of time, that was a real challenge. So I think that issue was addressed, but there are still many, many challenges ahead. Well, let's hear from Ariane from the Ariane, I hope I got that right, from Colpack, and Kathy Tate as well from Online Northwest.
Thank you, Congresswoman. So Colpack has been addressing broadband for about a year and a half. We set up a broadband action team in 2020. And the way we've decided to approach broadband in our region is to focus on middle mile infrastructure. And the reason we're doing that is because so often in rural areas, which our region is exclusively, last mile is a challenge because the kind of backbone infrastructure doesn't exist to serve that last mile community. And so we have a preliminary design for a fiber middle mile backbone throughout our entire region. It generally would follow the major highways and allow communities throughout our region to access last mile infrastructure. And what we've found is that we have many service providers who are willing to build out that last mile connection to entire communities, but we have them, and they won't require much subsidy to do that if that low cost middle mile infrastructure is in place for them to access. And so we are starting to write grant applications for the engineering and construction of that middle mile infrastructure. We have ISPs that are working with us to build the middle mile infrastructure. We're not sure who will own it, probably the counties. I think it's going to be different in each of our counties, but that will be wholesale leased to last mile providers. And the other thing that Colpack has been instrumental in working on recently is a statewide survey, speed test survey. We're working with the other districts in the state, as well as Link Oregon. We've been working a lot with Stuart Long. And we hope to roll out after the first of the year a statewide speed test survey. All of you will probably be hearing more about that in the coming month. And that will enable our state to have the data, on the ground data that we need to write grant applications for funding in the next year. So thank you so much.
Terrific. And of course, we're more than happy to help with any sort of grant funding and writing letters in support and doing what we can to connect funds with those in need. And I want to hear from Kathy. We had an opportunity to visit an online Northwest broadband tower in Yamhill County last summer. I'll never forget it when it was, because it was the height of blackberry season, and there were blackberries, and there was the tower, and the sun was shining. And so, Kathy, thanks for joining us, and like to hear from you as an internet service provider, how things are going and where the opportunities are.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you, Congresswoman. I really appreciated your visit last summer, and I've really appreciated hearing, everybody's conversations on this call about the work that's being done sort of on behalf of all of the users, the customers, a lot of students, to really understand, what the needs are. And I think as an internet service provider, that's always a challenge for us. We don't have we don't have that level of connectivity with all of our potential customers. So we know people need internet when they let us know that they do, but otherwise it's more difficult to figure that out. We have been in business for 24 years. We're headquartered in Yamhill County. Our way that we've stayed in relevant and in competition is that we have really always focused on rural connectivity. We've always tried to build internet where the other larger companies were not going. So we have a fixed wireless network that spans 4,500 miles in 6 counties, and we spend most of our time trying to expand that network and reach more rural customers through a wireless connection. There is equipment and there is capacity to, run Zoom calls and work from home and do all this streaming that you would like over a fixed wireless network, but it is, it is distance sensitive. It is subject to weather. It's, cannot go through hills, cannot go through trees. And we live in a lot of, very hilly tree not infested, but we have a lot of trees in our area. So it is a big challenge. But what we really look at from our organization, we also started building fiber a few years ago, about in 2014, and we actually have built fiber in the entire city of Dayton and Willamina, and we're working on Amity and Carlton right now. And I think to Ariane's point, it's like, once you can get to the city, building it out is not a huge lift for us, but there is some middle mile stuff that makes it more challenging. I feel like right now the challenge for internet service providers is the speed at which we can build and the cost which it is to get to the last mile to the end user. We have many miles of fiber in very remote areas in Yamhill County, but when somebody's driveway is a mile long or it's 5 miles between houses, those are some very expensive connectivity challenges that we have. And so having the opportunity for federal dollars, state and local dollars to expand our network and to get to the last mile is critical to making us be responsive in the way that the world is demanding right now. People cannot wait 5 years for some adequate connectivity to online school or to work from home. So we are working very hard at that every day. We have a lot of support. I appreciate Congresswoman coming and seeing what we're doing. We received a grant, a CARES Act grant from Yamhill County, and we've built 4 new tower locations and can serve thousands of a couple thousand additional customers that we couldn't reach otherwise. So we're working hard.
Well, thank you so much for the update. It was great to be out there and to see, the CARES Act was really toward the beginning of the pandemic, and it was great to see the work that was being done and the access that was being increased because of the CARES Act funding. So I want to just emphasize that the Build Back Better Act has about $280 million to the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, of course, within the Department of Commerce for grants to public-private partnerships for these projects to increase affordable broadband services in urban communities and communities of color, low and middle income communities. $5 million for affordable urban and suburban broadband advisory committee to really help with the advice and again, the data and making sure that the dollars are going to the right place. But also there's a fund to help economically vulnerable Americans acquire tools for success for affordable connected device programs. And I think Erica raised a really important point too about that digital literacy and the importance of that. Having the connectivity without the knowledge of how to use the devices and to stay connected is going to be something to address. So lots of potential there with the funds. The bipartisan infrastructure bill that's already passed and signed into law. That's about $65 billion in grants to states for broadband deployment. So really excited about that, the existing funds and the potential. So I'm just going to open it up. Any other comments, questions? I want to make sure that everyone has Commissioner Thompson.
Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate that because the money definitely will be a help, and we think we know how to use it. Here's what I'd tell you. In a tourist area, the appetite for broadband almost infinite, and the capacity gets used up. nothing else can happen if the tourists are in town doing the level of internet connectivity that they're used to having in urban areas. And I heard you say that there will be a urban suburban advisory committee. Is there an analogous rural advisory committee so that we continue to have our voice equitably heard?
There are absolutely provisions to make sure that rural communities and voices are heard. Absolutely. Yep. It's important. And that's why, this is a group here today from urban, suburban, and rural communities to emphasize the importance of making sure that there's connectivity everywhere, not just in urban areas. And I see Stuart and Dan both have raised hands. Go ahead.
I just wanted to echo, and then I'll defer to my boss, which is the importance of the middle mile. I also sit on the board of Link Oregon as a representative for K-12, and the work that Ariane's doing and others around the state of connecting that, it really does make that backbone that stitches together the anchor institutions that allow us to do things in the community and makes the last mile cheaper and more affordable. I sympathize with the internet providers right now. They do have a heavy lift and they cannot do it fast enough. But that middle mile will be critical to making that even more successful. So
appreciate that, and appreciate that work that's being done. Dan?
Thanks again for making this happen. So from just a school district perspective, one of the things that that became obvious to me through this conversation, but I just wanted to elevate it, is we're talking to a number of school districts here that like Hillsborough and Beaverton. I used to be the assistant superintendent in Tiger Tualatin, and before that I was after that I was superintendent in Hood River. And these are places that were able to pass bonds, able to invest in infrastructure that many children in Oregon don't live in those communities, have a very difficult time raising capital dollars. And what we saw in the pandemic, as Mayor Callaway pointed out, is an exacerbation of the impacts of that, especially for communities of color and our poor kids, who are many in Oregon, unfortunately. And so there's a piece here that I just think is something that if we leave to local communities only, there's going to continue to be a divide, no matter how many miles of fiber we build, because people just don't have that kind of equipment in the hardware infrastructure. So.
I appreciate that very much, that equity focus, and you're absolutely right to raise it. And even with the American Rescue Plan funds, there was the FCC Emergency Connectivity Fund. Those had to do with school districts that successfully applied. And we know that not every school district is going to apply successfully. So we have to make sure that we are looking at all of the needs across Oregon and the country, including in the smaller districts that don't often pass bonds to do the work that other districts do. Erica from Hillsborough School Board.
Yeah, hi. Thank you. I also just wanted to mention, or I think as Dan pointed out, we were very, and just in the time that we passed a bond, and then this work was also being completed in Hillsborough, it's like everything aligned and it was a perfect timing. But I think that we also need to think for us, what Mayor Callum mentioned is that because we're able to put that money in there, a lot of that, the heavier cost, overhead costs, we were able to save and put back in our districts. And I know this is probably the only time that I've seen that we've gathered and talk about this like cross entities and also different types of agencies. But I think that, so I just wanted to appreciate that you're bringing this kind of space, or creating the space to convene and talk about this. And if there's a way of continuing the conversation, but also figuring out how can we share, best practices or lessons learned or things like that around this, especially for other school districts or other areas, so that we're not, recreating the wheel or duplicating efforts. It's such a great opportunity for us to make sure that our communities and our families, they don't really, care which agency is the one that's doing it. They really just need the service. So how do we make sure that we're being good stewards, that we're partnering with each other as much as we can, but that maybe just thinking about what other ways can we create spaces to talk about this as the money comes in, and also as we start planning even more for the future, if there's any plans of, even having something more formal.
I appreciate that very much. And I'm glad we have this opportunity to have the conversation and look forward to continuing it. And I, of course, can speak with colleagues from across the country too about what they're seeing and what best practices are, and bring those back and share those. And I know Skip will be interested in that as well. Mayor Callaway.
Thank you, Representative. And again, thank you to you and especially your staff for always being so responsive. And this is, today's gathering is an example of that. We believe, and nobody will ever convince me otherwise, that the internet is an essential utility, just like electricity. At one point years ago, there was a debate, is it necessary? And we had the rural electrification project and all of that. And this is our generation. This is our times, electrification, if that makes sense. This is an essential utility. There's nobody that is going to be able to function well without it. As you mentioned, there's telehealth, and, there's all of the work that we do from home, the learning, and on and on and on. So thank you for all of your leadership and advocacy, to help make sure that we are able to make this investment in our community and subsequently into the lives of all the students who are represented here, as well as, our constituents. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Oh, I really appreciate that, Mayor. And you're right. I mean, we've seen, just especially during the pandemic, but even before, the importance of connectivity. And because I serve on the Education and Labor Committee and do a lot of work on workforce issues, I think I want to ask first Kathy, but then anyone else who wants to weigh in on this. As these funds are coming, the federal funds from the infrastructure bill and hopefully the Build Back Better Act soon, are we going to have the people to do the work? Do we have enough workforce with the skills they need to actually get the infrastructure built and operating?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think that workforce is definitely extremely challenging right now. It's sort of an interesting place that we're in, that we have a lot of opportunity and just can't seem to find people. What I will say is that for this particular industry, there's a lot of jobs that don't require a large amount of training or a college education, and so we do have the opportunity to reach out to a lot of our students that are graduating from high school, and people that are changing jobs, people that want to stay in their communities. And so I do see opportunities ahead. I think that we have to have some training programs in place to be able to do that. And I think for rural areas, we have to be able to, offer competitive salaries with some of the larger cities and larger communities can offer their employees. And that is sometimes challenging when you're in a rural area or a smaller area. But I think those are things that are required to keep for workforce, in your specific area. So thank you.
That's really helpful. And we do have, in fact, I worked very hard on this, about $20 billion in the Build Back Better Act for workforce. We started out with more in the House Education Labor Committee, but we ended up with $20 billion, which is still a lot for example, the workforce programs that are run through the Department of Labor. We're updating the National Apprenticeship Act for the first time since the 1930s. Industry partnerships with community colleges to make sure sure that community colleges have the programs that are relevant to the needs in the area. So again, really hopeful that this funding gets through as well to make sure that we have the workforce to build the infrastructure, because the needs both with the building infrastructure and as we transition to a clean energy economy, there's going to be a lot of jobs and a lot of opportunity for people to scale up. Commissioner Thompson.
Thank you, ma'am. The Workforce Investment Board is such an essential partner in our part of the world, and their funding has been tied to the unemployment level. So I hope that money is going through them because they have the skill set to produce the workforce efficiently. The second thing, and you know this, is housing. We can't have workers because we don't have housing. Yesterday, that the money for the modular mass plywood panel housing got another bump up. So you know that that's part of the mix. If we've got housing and the capacity to train folks, then we can address those workforce issues in this and every other regard.
You're absolutely right about the challenge. And I'm happy to report that the Build Back Better Act includes robust funding for more affordable housing, both in terms of direct support like housing vouchers, but also with incentives for the building and construction of a lot more affordable housing. So I know that's something Mayor Rogers cares about, and it really is important to the health of our communities and to our economy. So they're all connected, you know, the housing, the infrastructure, the education. So I really appreciate that. Okay, I'm going to do like a last call for final thoughts from anyone, and just
I guess I just want to make sure that I also plug in childcare, because that is a big component
Thank you.
and all this. So I just want to make sure that that's mentioned.
Thank you. And I do have a town hall meeting this evening from 5:30 to 7 on childcare. It's critical. And this is another issue where we saw the challenges pre-pandemic, and the pandemic has certainly exacerbated those. And so in the Build Back Better Act, we have funding for not only affordable childcare, so people won't be paying any more than 7% of their income. So very affordable childcare, but also universal pre-K for 3 and 4-year-olds, which is really going to make a difference. It's such a good investment in our children and our future. Steve.
Yeah, and something you said a few minutes ago really resonated with me, that families who are not connected and students who are not connected or underconnected existed before the pandemic, and this just exacerbated and really shined a light on our families who lacked connectivity and our students who lacked it for learning. So just wanted to say very appreciative of the efforts that have been made and the support that we've seen and felt in school systems regarding the ability to keep students learning. So just wanted to say thank you for that.
Well, thank you so much, and really appreciate the conversation and all you're doing there in our communities. I look forward to following up when we know more about the Build Back Better funds, and would like to invite you to please keep in touch as you see challenges and opportunities. And again, thank you all for what you're doing and for participating today. It was really, really helpful for me to hear from people who are really on the front lines addressing these challenges in our community and grasping the opportunities, because there are many out there, opportunities to improve connectivity and improve lives. So thank you, everybody. Stay safe, happy holidays, and take care.
Thank you.
Thank you all.